Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. So, this is the third session of the Guide to the Future of Work webinar series. We are on week 4, and this session particularly is about the human-centric law, the role of social justice, ethics, and cultural considerations in the future of work. We saw it as empirical to put this session together, not only amidst, first and foremost, or more importantly, due to the current turn of events around the globe on racial discrimination, gender-based violence, and other form of discrimination, not only in the workplace, but in countries around the world. So on this session, I will be the co-host and Avurungi will be our main host alongside Madi to bring you this particular session. Avurungi, please take it home. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Fadila. I mean, the issue of ethics, when you consider not only the future of work, but the fourth industrial revolution, which is intricately linked to the future of work, is quite interesting. So I'll be interested maybe to find out a bit more from our guests on how they think about, I think, the ethical elements of the fourth industrial revolution. And some of the arguments made is that by around 2025, the cell phones that we today hold on our hand will be embedded within our skin. So instead of getting a normal cool ink tattoo, the argument is that we will have our phones embedded within our skins. So I'm really quite interested in understanding the ethics of not only the 4IR, but also the future of work. So I'm really glad that we have Richard and Dorcas on the line to maybe take us through some of those questions. So yeah, maybe Fadila, I can just hand back to you to maybe take that as the first question, because I know you're quite involved when it comes to the future of work. Maybe to get your view on that, then we can go to our guests, just your interpretation or understanding of the ethics around the future of work.
Thank you so much, Avurungi. So for everyone who is just tuning in, this is the Guide to the Future of Work by Africans Living, fully in partnership with 1,000 African Voices, brought to you. And today we are talking about ethics, cultural consideration, and human-centric law in the future of work. It is interesting, Avurungi, that what you are talking about is already happening in Sweden. People are working with their chips on their bodies. They even have what they call chip parties right now. There is a lot of debate around the ethical consideration, not only of such kind of nanotechnology, but also on how artificial intelligence, how blockchain, augmented reality, and other forms of digital transformation are happening, and what role businesses and even entrepreneurs have in ensuring that the future of work is not just about technology, but also about humans. So on today's episode, I will want to begin the conversation by inviting Mr. Richard and Tiwaa to just share with us what should people's management in the future of work look like, and what are the key ethical considerations that need to be in place. But before we do that, I would want to give each of the speakers a minute to just share with us from what perspective they will be coming on this topic to set the ball in motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Avarengi. Personally, I think that when you look at the future of work, you're really looking at the impact of digital transformation. And the biggest impact of digital transformation is what I would like to term the blurring of the lines. There is nothing like work life. There's nothing like family life. There's nothing like social life. There's just life. Technology has merged so many spheres of existence into one huge bubble. And that is where the future of work is. And we have to remember, as personnel managers, as people managers, that we have a duty and ethical requirements to ensure that we realize that our employees, our staff, are not just in existence to serve the organization goals, but rather to work in a collaborative and synergistic relationship to create
Mm.
value, both for the employer and for the employee. So there are two things I would really want us to be discussing and to keep at the back of our minds while we discuss ethical issues in the future of work, particularly with human rights. Is one, how can we create value, not just for the
Right.
employers, but for the employees? And how can
Mhm.
we sustain growth? Because you have a lot of organizations that have started something fantastic, but have
Right.
died off along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Ms. Tiwaa, would you share with us the perspective from which you'll be coming on this discussion?
Yeah, hello Fadila. Thank you for the opportunity to join this session. My perspective, as you've already, introduced me to, it's coming from the human rights perspective or aspect of discussion. And I work in the government sector, specifically with the National Human Rights Institution, and talking about future of work and all sort of things like that, it's a bit slow when it comes to the government sector. I mean, it's like we are still tuned into the old ways of doing stuff and all that. But I think it's gradually kicking in with the way people or workers are forced to work more often than we used to be physical in the office. So my perspective coming to this discussion would be, talking about human rights perspective, yes, but also coming from the public sector aspect as well. So
Thank you, Tiwaa. Miss Brenda Wanjiru, share with us briefly what perspective you'll be coming on, and then we will begin the session.
Thank you for the opportunity. I come in with a take on work culture. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I come in checking on the perspective of work culture and how it affects results at the workplace. So I'll be looking at the protection of employees and employers, creation of positive relationships in the workplace, and also creating a positive environment in the workplace.
Thank you so much. So this question, any one of you can answer. What would you say from the individual perspective from which you're coming from, the key principles, policies, and skills that is required in the workplace of the future?
Okay, I'll just start, and I think we can just keep following the same order we've been having.
Okay.
The fundamental principle would always remain value creation. Value creation is what got the world through the first three industrial revolutions, and value creation is what will keep us going. The big difference in the fourth revolution is that who are we creating the value for? Time immemorial, we were always looking at creating value for the organization. You clock in at 9 in the morning, you clock out at 5. You're called in on the weekend and you show up, you say, yes, boss. You work for 30, 40 years, and before retirement, you get your long service award, and you think you've lived a fulfilled life. But now we have to start looking at value creation in the other direction. How well has the organization impacted the life of the employee? What are they doing to make sure that the family of the employee are okay, so that you don't have what we call a crossover effect? No one can produce for an organization if they are not happy at home. So companies and organizations really need to realize that employees are humans, they are not machines. And even though technology is going to be bringing about a revolution where we are going to be using more machines, you still need human beings to interface with these devices. So the foundation behind digital transformation is actually people management. And until you learn how to create value for your people will not be able to optimally create value for you in return. And this is where we need to have a paradigm shift for HR managers everywhere, particularly in Africa.
Maybe Richard, the concept of value creation is an interesting one. We talk about, and you're right, in the past, value creation had to do with the enterprise or the corporate, and now value creation is moving more to the individual. But maybe for our listeners, if you don't mind, when you say value creation, what do you mean by that? If you don't mind just expanding on that concept, because I think it's a very, very interesting one indeed.
Okay, well, I basically define value creation as once you have two separate entities coming together to achieve a common purpose. Sometimes you might not get your particular target, but you'll get something that is of value to somebody else. So value creation traditionally would be your work deliverables. Were you able to get your assignments done on time? Were you able to hit your sales targets? Were you able to hit your manufacturing objectives? Or if you're in the finance industry, were you able to cut costs or generate revenue? But now we can look at value creation as, what about the mental health of your employee? What about the psychological well-being of your employee? What is going on with his or her family life? Healthcare. It's just recently now that we are beginning to consider the fact that employees need to have good healthcare insurance. So these are some of the things that we need to start looking at. That okay, if this person did not have a job, these are the difficulties and challenges they'll be facing. Now that they are working with my organization, what problems are they facing that I can fix for them? So usually it has always been, I'm about to hire you, what can you do for my company? But now I'm about to enter into a partnership with you. How can we help each other out?
I love that. So we're moving away from more of employment enshrined relationship to more of a collaborative partnership approach. So that's the foundation of people's management. I love that. Dorcas, would you like to add anything, or Brenda, on this particular subject before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, Fadila, I think Richard has touched an important point that which is focusing on workers, and how we can actually enhance their productivity, enhance their well-being in the midst of the future of work and major changes that is happening. So I think that's a major point that Richard touched on there. So we can move on if Brenda is okay with that.
Fadila, yesterday I was talking to a friend who, for at least the last 15 years, this person has worked for a mining company. And in the past, when you had a job, you were okay, but I have known the friend for 15 years, and he's wanted to leave his employment to start his own thing. But when I was talking to him yesterday, he mentioned that he had redefined the job, and he now thinks of it as his company within that corporate. So the salary that he earns at the end of the month, in his mind, is like the profit that he makes for the services that he renders to that company, which I found that interesting. But maybe if you can, and I think that's where the mindset starts to shift. I am interested in maybe Tiwa's view on, she's a writer and a human rights researcher. I know that with the fourth industrial revolution coming, the law sector or the law society may be impacted by maybe some artificial intelligence type work replacing what lawyers used to do. I'm wondering, Tiwa, if that's something that you worry about as a writer and a human rights researcher, maybe less so as a human rights researcher, but more on the as a writer side. Do you think there will be a time when what you do, your output could be done by a robot?
Certainly yes. Certainly yes. I do worry. I think the changes, it's here with us. It's here with us. It's happening, and I mean, I'm afraid that what I do currently now, maybe in 5-10 years to come, a robot can sit in my place and do the work I'm doing, and I worry. And I think that's the place where I mean human rights principles and ethics need to come into play. I think fine, it's happening. I mean, future of work is happening. We cannot stop it because most of these changes are supposed to help us do work better and do it more effectively, like more than we're doing now. But I'm thinking there should be a kind of alignment. There should be a balance between how we progress in our way of work we shouldn't be more focused on, automating everything that human beings can do. There should be a balance between, what we can make machines do in the place of humans. I think there should be a balance in the sense that people should be, workers, for example, in my place, for example, I'm looking at my office, for example, most of the things we do is not automated. It's human beings that go into offices and push pen and paper in the basic term of work. Now, I'm thinking in 20 years, this might change. And I'm thinking, what happens to workers like myself who will still be in employment? I'm thinking our minds, or HR managers, for example, most especially, not even for example, need to start training workers to see the changes that are coming, to encourage employees and to provide training whereby employees will be able to enhance their skills to match the changes that are coming, so that, like, I think somebody said previously, whether now or before in the previous session, that machines are coming, but we need human beings to interface with these machines to be able to do what we do. So I think HR managers have a bigger role to play in training employees to better understand these changes that are coming and the role that they can play in these changes that are coming.
This is a very interesting analogy. I would like to add a little bit in respect to the mind shift, that irrespective of whatever industry that we find ourselves or whatever role or part of our career we follow, we individually need to redefine what success in our career means, because we literally spend 40% of our lifetime working. So it is important, whether you're in a role that you already love or you're in a company that you absolutely hate, redefine what fulfillment in your career means. Because one of the things that we seek to do here at African Living Fully is to inspire you to be limitless in defining what a fully lived life is for you. And it's interesting that your friend Aburungi has shifted his mentality and kind of redefined what he sees as fulfilling work. Now, in respect to machines taking over the jobs, I believe sometime earlier this year, I was listening to a conversation and it says, yes, it's inevitable that automation is going to happen, and automation will happen across industries. But we must not forget that the humans are going to be the gap between the interpretation of data that will be produced by machines and the ability to make decisions. So emotional intelligence is one of the key skills and principles that we need to be able to adhere to. The ability to continue to upskill as professionals at whatever stage we are in our career. We need to know that the skills that we have that are relevant today may not be the skills that will be relevant tomorrow, even within the same role. So it is that mind shift that will enable us to continue to stay relevant. We may not necessarily have the control of what level automation should go into, but at the same time, especially in developing countries like ours, we have to, human resource managers and team leaders need to be able to determine at what level and at how deep do they want automation to actually be involved. And then on the part of people is not developing the resistance against this change, but rather developing not just the mindset, but the adaptability to keep upskilling. Because once you're not ready to keep upskilling, jobs are going to be taken. And that's the reality. It's already happening in other parts of the world. We are a little bit lucky because it's not happening as fast as it is in other parts of the world, but eventually it will catch up. And the ability for us to really operate from that perspective will make the difference. Now, I would invite Aburungi. Would you want to ask the next question, or Mari?
Yeah, I'll maybe bring Brenda into the conversation, but before that, I mean, there's a lot of reliance we place on the human resources department. And I mean, to be honest, globally, they are not the most advanced department within the companies. Just this afternoon, I was talking to an HR person within our company, and I said, gee, dear so-and-so, when I call you, I always know you'll send me some form to fill before we can have a conversation. So it's not like the most progressive. But yeah, moving to Brenda, and as a history and cultural educator, as much as we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, and that's really where the future of work conversation is happening, there are those that have started to talk about the fifth industrial revolution, where they say the one thing that you cannot take away from human beings is their humanity, basically the cultural element of humans. So I'm interested maybe to get Brenda's view on the cultural aspect or aspects of or around the whole future of work conversation. Brenda, if you maybe can just give us just a high level view of how you are thinking about the future of work from a cultural perspective.
Okay, thank you so much. When we look at the cultural sector in the workplace, there are many things that we are looking at. Ms. Tiwaa had talked about how working for the government has been not as positive as we would want it to be, and you have also provided that experience. Now, when we come to the cultural sector or the part of work, the different things we're looking at first and foremost is like language and communication. As you have stated that the HR is not the most advanced sector. Why is it not advanced? Because we have lost that human touch. When we're looking at this human touch, again, it's just the little things, you know. How do you approach this person who's coming to you if you're the HR? If you are looking at this person with an angry face, you know, if you're sad, if you're pissed off, as Sir Richard had stated that this whole work life, you know, tends to affect you. We do not seem to realize that it ends up rubbing off on the person on the receiving end. So then they end up coming in again with an angry aura, and you know, you're not able to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. Also looking at how you treat your employees at your work. If there is a complaint, you know, from one of your employees, do you actually sit down and listen to this complaint? How do you solve this situation? What alternative dispute resolution measures are you taking? You know, at the end of the day, when we talk about the work culture or the environment that you're working in, it all boils down to communication. We cannot have that in as much as we're talking about having a quote unquote robot future, you know. We cannot have that with them. If communication fails, then everything else fails. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Brenda. I mean, I'll hand over to Fadila, but yeah, thank you for that perspective. I mean, some things cannot be replaced, and one of those critical things is communication. So I couldn't agree with you more there. Fadila, back to you.
Thank you so much, Avarungi. So let's shift a little bit of conversation around the issues that are prevalent and that have been amplified by recent events. The first aspect is the issue of racial justice. We are in Africa. I personally, until until my late teens, I didn't know what it meant to be a Black person, because I was born and brought up in West Africa. And as everybody knows on this call, West Africa is 101% dominated by Black and indigenous African people, unlike other parts of Africa. Now, so that's one issue. The second issue is the issue of gender equality. The third issue has to do with gender biasness within the workplace. And one of the, I wouldn't call it the last issue, but it has to do with implication of ethical considerations in respect to the need for employees to take a stand, not reactive stand, but proactive stand to creating a workplace that is not just focused on profitability and performance, but also thinks about sustainability and the ethical aspect of the work, because it is very perturbing to note by general statistics that occurred last week from a survey that indicated that over 70% of employers did not even talk about the prevailing issues that were happening. In Nigeria, for example, there were several girls within a 2 weeks period that were raped and killed. Some people were brutalized by the police. There are issues related to endemic sexual violence within the workplace. So what role, from the three perspectives of which we have our speakers coming from, would you say that employers have, particularly business owners and people's manager, in redefining what the workplace looks like?
I think I'll go first. Fadila, if that's okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, I'm particularly interested because I had racial discrimination, I had gender inequality, and then my human rights lenses are up there. Okay.
Right.
So talking about I think I'll touch more on gender inequality. I mean, yes, I mean, this past 2 weeks has been emotionally, traumatic for most of us with issues going on from, I mean, racial discrimination in America, killing of blacks, and then the rape and then killing of women also in Nigeria. It's been, I mean, such an emotional time for most of us. And then I don't know, it just exposes um, how our society is formed. These problems have been with us. It is with us. But most of the time, we just do not acknowledge it till something happens and then we all react to it. And then I am hoping with this whole process, with people talking about race, people talking about killing from blacks, I hope it doesn't end with just talking, but then there's something tangible, that tangible changes are made. And then coming back to the workplace, I mean, working with the National Human Rights Institution, there was this case we handled last year that had to do with, I mean, gender inequality. And we realized, I mean, the case was involving two women who worked with a security institution in the country, I mean, in Ghana. They were fired because they got pregnant within a 2-year probationary period that they were not supposed to have gotten pregnant. And they brought the case to my institution. And then, I mean, looking at it straight away, we all know this is discrimination, because imagine I am working in this security institution with my husband, and I get pregnant within this 2-year probationary, and I get kicked off, and my husband is still working, and then you are thinking it takes two to get pregnant, so why is one being punished for that? And
Right.
I mean, they were not just punished because they had a policy in place, and then the policy itself is discriminatory. How do you punish, I mean, one sector of the human population because of their natural role of birthing, of nurturing? I mean, we nurture, we give birth, but that doesn't mean we cannot work as well. We cannot be productive in our workspaces as well. So right away, the policy is very discriminatory, and they brought it to us. At the end of the day, it went to court. They were reinstated. They were, I mean, paid compensation for all the they stayed home for like almost 2 years without pay and all that. They were paid all those, I mean, salaries they were supposed to have paid within that period. And it became an issue. Now people started talking, oh, that's not good. It was like, I don't know, it's like a discussion. People thinking, oh, as a woman, I think it's supposed to help you. I mean, you knew when you were getting into the job already that there was that policy in place. So why did you break it, and sort of things like that? And then we know it is bad. And right away, the good thing is other institutions that have similar discriminatory policies quickly changed it. Yes, they quickly changed it because they realized that now women are being assertive. Now people know that there's right and wrong. You cannot just play with their lives like that. So if they don't take care, they can be sued as well and paid huge sums of money. So I mean, like you said, I pray and hope that we are not always reacting. We always don't have to react to issues. The issues are always there. I hope we are more proactive in dealing with these issues. Trust me, you go to most institutions in Ghana, you realize there's no policy, there's no gender policies in place. And even if there is a gender policy, it doesn't work. It's just like a toothless something that is there, it doesn't bite. It's just there. You cannot, both men and women are supposed to, I mean, be given equal treatment. And that's some of the ethical things that workplaces need to enforce. Everybody needs to be treated equally. There should be equal treatment with compassion, with respect, with dignity, so that every staff is able to give up their 110% to work effectively. If support is there for both women and men in the workplace and in the society as well, we can all, I mean, be together, work well, give up our best, and then everybody is okay. So I think that's the bit I wanted to add to that discussion. Yes.
Thank you so much. A quick follow-up question in maybe a bullet form. For an organization that is looking to respect the human rights and the social rights of people, what would you say is the starting point for instituting a policy and a structure and a culture that is What can they do? If a human resource manager is listening right now and they know that they do not have these policies, or perhaps they have these policies, but they are discriminatory, what is the best practice required from your perspective?
Okay, so the first way is to look at regulations that exist. We have all these human rights principles that are there. You have human rights. We have, I mean, a lot of conventions that are there. Conventions, I mean, against the rights of women and sort of things like that. And even the International Labour Organization have lots of laws that actually, I mean, highlight on how to treat employees equally with respect and all that. So they can start from there, looking at the laws, international laws and principles, looking at international human rights conventions, looking at the national laws, because national laws are there to protect, I mean, both men and women, and they are there. So they can start from looking at all these regulations, and then they will eventually get to know some of the things they're supposed to put in there in their policy and to respect and to enforce. Secondly, in getting all these things aside, they need to involve, I mean, crucial staff. It doesn't have to be just women because they are doing a gender policy. It has to be both men and women. It's a collaborative effort. So they need to get the staff. They need to, I mean, do a survey or something like that and get the views of the staff. I mean, crucial people, and I would say even everybody in, I mean, in the organization, get their views on what should be included and what not to be included, what is working and what is not working, and then be included, because then it's supposed to be a document that is workable. Everybody is supposed to, I mean, do his or her part. So they need to get the views of everybody. And then I think with that, they'll be able to, I mean, get, I mean, an effective gender policy that works as well, not just something because they need to have it. So they're just doing it for just show. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you so much. I will let Aburungi ask the follow-up questions. I have a question for Brenda. I'll reserve for later.
Yeah, I think, Fadla, what I wanted to add, I mean, when we listen to racial conversations, we're hearing more and more people saying, if we are going to solve the issue of racism, you need to get white people talking to fellow white people. So similarly, if we're going to have a progressive gender conversation, it then follows that men need to talk to other men about what we can do to at least achieve gender parity. So with that, we then need to bring Richard back into the conversation and say, I mean, from a male or perspective, what do you think, Richard, we as men can do to ensure that there is some parity? It feels silly to have a gender conversation in 2020, but unfortunately, that's where we are. But in my mind, it doesn't make sense that it's still a conversation that we need to have because we have not achieved equality. So maybe, Richard, I mean, from your perspective, what are your views on how we can achieve gender equality?
Okay, thank you very much for that. First off, we have to realize that there is no real divide between the workplace or the employer and the employee. This concept of a company is fictional at best. Companies don't exist other than in the law books. Companies are made up of human beings, right? So we have to first realize that we are all human beings. The people that are drafting these policies, the people that are implementing these policies are human beings. So it is from this perspective that we can actually bring about change. I was involved in a survey of over 400 workers in Lagos, and it will shock you to know that over 97% of the people that were surveyed believe that most of the problems that they faced in their workplace, most of the conflicts, most of the cultural issues had nothing to do with the firm policy, but rather with how they felt they were being treated unofficially. So while I agree that we should have proper workplace policies that bring about both racial, gender, and class parity, what is more important is that we as human beings need to come together and talk. You know, the HR manager is a human being, the employee is a human being. As a guy, if I hear someone in the workplace make a statement or a comment or a decision that I think is unfair, I should call the person out on it immediately, because what is wrong, irrespective of who is doing that thing or making that statement. So I think I once was involved in a workplace situation where one of the heads of the organization accused a female member of staff of not being decently attired because she had the traditional natural hair. No, not the clothing now, it's the hairstyle. So because she is going natural as opposed to the, what do you ladies call it, the weave, the Brazilian, Peruvian, Triple A gold. And the person said, this is not presentable for this line of work. And I didn't see anything. But later on, it struck me that I am a part of the problem. I should have spoken up immediately. I should have challenged the person, and this is where value creation comes in. I should have asked the person who made this statement, what is the correlation between this lady's hairstyle and the value that you hired her to create for your organization? If she is delivering on all her deliverables, then why should you care about what she wears? You know, if you look at most of the startups, particularly your .com companies, your Silicon Valley companies, right? The reason why they grow so quickly is because they shed, at the beginning, in fact, not that they shed, they don't even have all these hard paper policies. You just have a bunch of guys, a bunch of girls, people coming together with a common goal and objective. We want to design Facebook. We want to create Twitter. And they just get it done. If someone says, I can't come to work for the next 2 weeks, I have something personal to take care of, they'll say, oh, okay, we look forward to seeing you in another 2 weeks' time. It's not, oh, your contract says you must have clocked in at this time or that time, or you are not allowed to get pregnant, or if you get pregnant, you must return in 2 days. Let's forget about what is on paper. What is on paper is important, okay, because there are going to be some people that are going to go against the mold, and only the paper can keep them in check. But what is more important is the culture. You need a cultural revolution. And this is not an employer versus an employee something. It is an issue of we are all in the workplace together. What are we trying to achieve and how can we get it done? So when I talk to most startups that I consult for, I ask them, why did you set up this company? What are you trying to achieve? When you're doing recruitment, what are the elements you're looking for in the employees that you're trying to recruit? And most of the time you realize that there's a disconnect. And I say, no, recruit for your objective. And as long as that person keeps delivering, then keep them there. You know, let's keep our eye on the prize. And that's the only way we can actually develop as a people, you know, by working together, creating synergy, creating value. So men have that, because unfortunately the gender parity is skewed in our favor. So we have the power and therefore the duty to drive that discussion and bring about equality in the workplace.
Oh my goodness. I could not have had anyone said this better. This summarizes performance over presence. This is the same foundation of the argument related to remote work, on the argument related to how somebody looks, whether he's having dreadlocks or she's having tattoos on her body or whatever it is, or even the person is living with albinism. Like next week and the weeks to come, we're going to be talking about inclusivity and diversity in the workplace. But this is the foundation, and you have hit the nail right on the head that you talked about culture. Now let's move to Brenda. You are an international law, African history, and cultural educator. We had a conversation a few days ago before the session, and you were sharing how you talk about African history and culture. Now, in respect to the workplace and generally as in the movement of the future of work, what type of culture do we, first thing, we know the type of culture that we require. I retract my statement back, but how can we make the culture development of an organization be an issue that is worked by everybody? And what role does the leaders of the organization have in instilling and creating that culture?
Thank you so much for your question. I think the previous two speakers talked about inspiring your employees and as using them as a positive change to the company. But we must also keep in mind that implementation of laws and implementation of this so-called culture is a collaboration. Now, for us to have the so-called positive culture, we must also ask ourselves, like, even though we are inspiring these people, do they want to be inspired? You know, that is a very important question, because as Sir Richard has stated that we need to, how he spoke up for his colleague, are other people willing to do that and to make the change? You know, we cannot talk about, for example, our African history when we ourselves are not yet ready to deal with our own background. One major mistake I have seen that we make in this current society is that we think the current problems we are facing are problems, but what we call problems are actually reactions to problems. You know, I think Aburungi had talked about racism, for example. Racism is not really the problem; it's a reaction to the problem. And what this specific problem is, are we actually doing enough to stand up for ourselves? You know, you cannot come and say that I have experienced racism from this white person and include the white people in this racist talk when our own African people are not ready to deal with that miseducation that we received from these white people. Because Mr. Avurungi can come in and say that fellow white people should speak to their white people, but are Africans ready to speak to their Africans and tell them that, you know, this is also an issue? If it is superiority, they're not superior. We need to look at ourselves and say, hey, we are also as good, you know. With the question, I think Dorcas had talked about sexism. You know, we cannot talk about sexism again if men are not involved, because if they are the perpetrators, then you also need to sit them down and ask them, like, why do you think that this woman should not be this way and that woman should be that way? You know, you have to deal with that first before you come in to the sexism. And I have a lot of things going on in my mind. I'm not sure if I'm directing it to the right place. Yeah.
No, I think it's beautiful that you mentioned. There's an
Yes.
issue that you highlighted. The
Yes.
issues that we have within ourselves. Last week
Yes.
on Sunday, I believe we had this conversation around how we can. Okay, a friend of mine, I just remembered.
Yes.
A friend of mine shared this. She said racism, colorism, and toxic tribalism are cousins. Their grandfather is delusional supremacy. Now let's bring that back into the workplace and in Africa
Okay.
in general. We
Yeah.
are talking about racism, particularly in in outside of West Africa,
Yes.
because majority of us in West Africa, in fact all of us are blacks in West Africa, but we
Yes.
have institutional problems that have to do with tribalism. We have
Yes.
institutional problems that have to do with ethnocentric policies, even within the workplace. We have issues in relation to gender disparity. We have issues related to, did you know this person before you came into this work? Classism and how people are being judged. So really I would want to hear from all of you, what do we need to do to change the culture that we have in the workplace? And how can we make everybody be a party to this revolution of cultural change and attitudinal change in the workplace? Because I feel like that is the foundation of everything that is going to happen. And in doing that, how can employees exercise their rights and their responsibilities? How can employers ensure that they also they're not just looking at the books, but they are actually looking at the human aspect of the way in which we work?
I think if I may start, um, if I may start,
Yes, please.
yeah. Just to go back to what I had said, the problem is not usually the problem is it's a reaction to the problem. Now, when it comes to the tribalism and the sexism, as you have talked about, you know, we need to find out first of all, where did all this come from? You know, just to give a background, you have talked about West Africa. When I first started this, and currently my first contacts were people from ECOWAS, And I was having a really tough time working with them because one, they looked at me like, you are very young, you don't know what you're talking about. And two, immediately they would see the name and it's a female, then they don't want to talk to me, because you're a woman, you don't know what's going on, Now instead of, if that would happen to our fellow women, now instead of you coming in and saying, oh, the officials at ETCOAS do not want to work with me, we need to first of all go back and ask, okay, why did they actually say this? Because most of the time it is something that they have gone through and has been instilled in their mind, and they're projecting that insecurity to you. So we end up, so to say, putting a band-aid over, a bullet wound. It does not solve the situation, because if you remove me from there, another woman will come in and still experience that same thing. If we were to
Right.
deal with tribalism, I could give a very good example of East Africa. You cannot come and say that we're going to deal with tribalism before you actually look at the roots of tribalism. When you look at the roots of tribalism, it goes back to colonization, the miseducation that we got through colonization. So if you're bringing it to the workplace, these are people coming in from different fields, different walks of life, who have this specific mentality, and you cannot come in and say that this specific company, we're not tribalist. But if the people leave this company, they're still taking that thought process to another company. So you have
Right.
not actually dealt with the problem, you just moved it.
Like we need to have the African cultural history class with you on one of our shows. So we'll reserve that for another time. Aburungi,
Okay.
are there some elements of our conversation today that you feel like we have not yet touched on, or any of the speakers, please? Because this is a conversation, and not what do you call it? Yeah. So it's possible that there are some expectations you had for the call or element that you wanted to talk about. Please feel free to add to the conversation. If you have any questions, you're among the participants, let us know in the comment section below. How do you think we can change the way in which we work, in which we manage people within the workplace, and how do you think we can become more human-centric, and what are the questions that you have that perhaps our guests can be able to answer?
Yeah, no, thanks, Fadil. As a podcaster, I think over time you learn not to have expectations and just allow the conversation to unfold. So I've
Okay.
really thoroughly enjoyed whether it was Richard or Tiwa or Brenda, their interpretation on different questions. I mean, naturally, there are endless questions to be answered, but unfortunately, we've got limited time. But I'm really glad at sort of the attempt made today to unpack some of the questions that not only our guests and listeners may have, but that humanity as a whole has. So I'm really glad we touched on whether it was sexism or gender equality or racism, etc. I think the conversation has been really progressive. So thanks for that. I don't necessarily have any other questions. There are, again, lots of questions that we can ask, but I think for today, I've really thoroughly enjoyed having our guests online. It's really been great listening to their views.
It's beautiful because they have set in motion the conversations, and not just conversation, project and activities that we will be working on into the future. Because one of the key pillars of the work we do right here at Africans Living Fully, and that even led to the partnership we have with 1,000 African Voices, is really centered around the future of work and how we can better equip organizations, individuals to be not just at optimum level of performance, but be human, be empathic, be sustainable, and be ethical in the way in which we grow. So I will invite at this point, Tiwa, if you have any last submissions in relation to human rights issues that need to be considered, or anything you would like to add to the conversation, now is the time while I go through some of the questions that we have from the guests that have sent on Facebook. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fabiola. I think the last bit I would like to add to the discussion is when we're talking about the future of work. I mean, one particular trend that is happening now is remote work, and when it comes questions of with people, I mean, more working more remotely, people working in, I mean, various institutions. I mean, I can work for like 3 different organizations remotely part time during different times of the day. And then
Right.
what comes to mind from the human rights perspective is the fact that, I mean, do part-time workers or remote workers have the same protection, have the same benefits as permanent workers? I mean, we need to think about that and how organizations can be, I mean, encouraged to design policies that look at the protection of workers, remote workers especially, people who work part-time with this current trend coming up. I mean, COVID has taught us that changes are bound to happen. We cannot
Yeah.
expect to be in the workplace physically all the time. And there are times that we would work somewhere, I mean, different countries and all that. So I'm thinking about, I mean, protections for remote workers, protections for part-time workers. If I'm sick and I'm not able to even work remotely for a week or for a month, do I still get my pay? I mean, COVID is here. I'm not able to work. I'm home. Do I still get my benefits and all that? I mean, if I'm sick by COVID, do I still get health benefits to cater for my healthcare and all sort of things like that? So these are things that I think workers and employers and employees are supposed to, I mean, discuss going forward, so that we know that whilst we are looking at productivity, while we are looking at the resilience of work structures and all that, protection of workers are also paramount in these discussions as well. Yeah.
It is profound that you mentioned that. Last week, I was on a live stream by a colleague of mine whom I work with, and he's in Mexico. He's a remote work coach, so he does remote work coaching, and I do remote business coaching. But we were interviewing one of the prominent remote work lawyers in Canada, and she was talking just about the same issues and the different approaches and policies and consideration that companies need to, that the future of work has poised for companies to rethink, and even how that is influencing the job market and what type of organizations people want to work with moving forward. So thank you for highlighting that. And I believe that this is something that we will talk about, we will explore further, and we'll find people who are expert in this particular field to provide more clarity moving forward. One more question. Okay, Richard has a question. So Richard, would you want to ask that question on the mic to the other guest, or would you want to answer that question or submission that you have?
Actually, I would like to do this not just to Tiwa and Brenda, but to everyone who is live here with us. There's a saying that it's one thing to have data, it's another thing to have wisdom. And it's only through the accumulation and interpretation of data that we can have insightful information that we can use to make decisions. So while I may have my experiences, I'm sure Tiwa has, Brenda, you also, Vadila, and Aburengi, one question we should all be asking ourselves, and perhaps maybe we can collate a database that can be shared through this platform in the future. What are the elements or key things that a job candidate should look out for, or that they can observe easily, that will give them a hint into the workplace culture of an organization that they are about to go into? Because unfortunately, once you get the job, it's almost too late. You walk in and you realize, I have a horrible boss, this place is very toxic, they're classist, they're sexist, they're racist, they don't respect women, they don't respect work-life balance. But sometimes I think that there are some things that you could predict ahead of time, and you could avoid some of these mishaps. So it would be nice if we could all share our experiences in terms of, oh, if you notice this, there's a higher chance of that. And if we can collate this, we can actually prepare a database that can serve as a beacon, a guide for future job searchers. Thank you.
I love this. Richard, this is just the beginning of our interactions and our partnership, I would say. You brought so much perspective that is very progressive. We will take that on and we'll discuss further with you and Aburungi as well. So we are happy to do that on Africans Living Fully, because this series is just the beginning of deeper project that will come along this line. And it's good to know that someone like you is also thinking in that particular perspective. There are a lot of red flags. I think it will take more than an hour to talk about those, but we can conduct a survey and we will be able to collate that data and see where that goes from here. Aburungi?
Yeah, thanks, Fadila. I mean, I really love Richard's question. And so I've got a son, almost 14. So when I think about the future of work, I like observing how he's thinking about his world currently, because what goes on in his mind for me represents the future of work. He's just
Right,
started high school or secondary school, and he's having a difficult time understanding why he needs to go through that.
right,
Whereas in my time, you needed to go through high school, then varsity, then get a job. But in his
right,
mind is, gee, high school, do I really have to? Because I can make money doing this other thing, whatever the thing is now. And that's really the difference. So yeah, I like thinking about the future of work from his perspective so that I can calibrate my current state using how he's thinking about it, because I think there's a lot to learn from the next generation, which in my case my son represents. But yeah, great question, Richard, and I agree it requires a bit more time to think about that. Yeah, thanks, Fadila.
fantastic. I love how this conversation is going. However, we have a time commitment to our speakers, to our audience. Some of them have been here since the very first session. Brenda, do you have any last parting words that you will share with us? And Maddie as well.
Just thank you for the opportunity. I've been able to learn a few things which will help me in my future endeavors, and I just want to say thank you to you and the my fellow panelists.
Thank you so much. Maddie, do you have any last questions for any of our speakers or input you would like to add to this conversation?
Thank you, Fadila, for giving me the opportunity to share any final words. I just want to thank our three speakers and Fadila and Avarungi as well for hosting. For myself, I believe that I come from a significant background in regards to my relation with Africans living fully. I personally am a non-African. I am an Asian American born and raised in New York City, and I've been really honored to attend these webinar sessions over the last 4 weeks. And it's my hope that being a support and being an ally to Fadila and to Africans living fully overall, that I can help bridge gaps that we have, whether it's regarding race, whether it's regarding sexism, whether it's regarding inclusivity or lack of, and bring some diversity as well. And it really has been an honor for me to learn from your different perspectives and to be in a virtual room with very impactful Africans from many different countries. So it's truly been an honor to hear everyone share and be at the forefront of these conversations. And thank you so much to Fadila for giving me the opportunity to learn with her and to help build this community. So, thank you so much.
It is my honor and privilege to have each and every one of you. Maddie, I really appreciate the support that you have been giving to this project from the onset, actually. So everybody, when I was concepting the idea of Africans Living Fully, I think I had not yet launched the website. I was in New York City last couple of months back, and we were driving from DC, going to visit Maddie's family. And we were talking about how this platform can become a bridge and can really serve not just Africans in the continent, but Africans in diaspora, and how we can be able to spark not only conversation, but projects. And I remember very well, we were then talking about the year of return and how we can be able to look at that from a business perspective, creating some kind of business bridge that will enable and sustain the impact and the euphoria of, you know, people back up there want to come down here to explore and reconnect with the motherland. So it's beautiful to have her on this journey and to continue to have her support. I would like to thank each and every one of you on the call: Akisa, Bertrand. I also have Samori, that's my girl. Damilola, Mr. Ebenezer is still with us. Ire Olua, Popolu, thank you for being here. Jermaine, Kezia, Mrs. Aisha Sarki, that's my sister, Patrick, Tiwa, Lizzie, and all of you who have joined either in the first, second, or third session and stayed throughout with us till this session. I hope that you have really learned something that you are going to implement, because information is not sufficient. Action is what makes the difference between those who make a change and those who talk about making a change. So we hope that you are on the path of those who will take action based on the information. Without any further ado, thank you so much to our speakers. Richard, I appreciate you for really accepting this within a very short notice. We literally met on WhatsApp. Dorcas Tiwaa for being the bedrock of Africans Living Fully. She also doubles as the editor for Africans Living Fully, while she has her full-time job as well as working freelance with different organizations. Brenda, thank you so much for your acceptance. It is indeed amazing what technology can do. I literally just connected with you a couple of days ago, and today you are here with me. Aburungi, thank you, and the other guy who reached out to me to speak during the 1,000 African Voices podcast. I appreciate having you as a media partner and building and nurturing this relationship forward. Without any further ado, I'd like to thank you all for being here with us. This is Africans Living Fully in partnership with 1,000 African Voices, bringing you the guide to the future of work and global transition. Today, Thursday, 11th of June, 2020, we have had 3 sessions, all centered around social equity, social justice, entrepreneurship, and how we can be able to create a workforce of the future that is not only profitable, but sustainable and ethical. Until next time, we will see you on Thursday. Bye for now.